Cow RC is your one-stop shop for all things RC car maintenance, carrying everything you need to keep your cars looking good and working well. From the basic chassis cleaner that doesn't dry out your plastics, to jet air blasters, no need to carry large and loud air compressors, to simple wipes to keep both your hands and bodies clean. That's just the surface though. Everything needed to keep your cars working smoothly and optimally while staying organized, like silicone spray, light grease coating, silicone bench mats, and the almighty Utter Butter are also staples of Cow RC's large selection of products. Be sure to use code NNRC to save 10% off your next purchase from cowrc.com.
Nitro is the glory, but e-buggy pays the bills. Welcome to the No Name RC Podcast. Get ready for some serious bench racing. But be warned, we speak our minds, express our thoughts, and sometimes things can get a little rowdy.
Hate, and he just was influenced by the hate coming from the left, the hate coming from the right.
And let's get back to more club racing and less of this grabbing racing.
It's hard not to be arrogant when you're always right.
See what I mean? That's exactly why people call you arrogant, Max.
You may not agree with everything we say, but it's definitely worth a listen.
And our pick, can you stop whatever you're doing?
Join your host, Lefty the Great, with co-hosts and guests as they get together to chat RC.
Hey, after that race that I watched this morning, I have to talk about it.
Here we go. $100 right here, $100 throw. Oh no! I like this.
Yes, indeed. Nitro's the glory, but e-buggy pays the bills. What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Lefty. This is show number 294. And it's just a one-off interview. That's right. I hope everybody's doing well. I know I had promised that I was going to have a special guest this weekend, but he's kind of, he went to the Mugen Challenge this past weekend, which looked great, and wasn't able to make it. So we have a one-off interview that I did a couple of weeks ago, well, actually a few months ago with Joel Johnson. It was a great chat with him. I'll talk more about that in a second. But I have to say thank you to some people before we get going. I want to say, first off, thank you to you guys, the NNRC squad around the world. Without you guys, none of this is possible. Thank you for all the continued support. I greatly appreciate it. Don't forget, if you're listening to this on the audio side, come over, hit that like notification button on the YouTube side. Leave a comment. If you're only listening on the audio side, don't forget, just leave a review right there. And give us a share. We greatly appreciate it. Also, a big shout out to the patrons of the NNRC as well as the YouTube members. You guys get early perks such as early access and other cool things. I greatly appreciate your support. If you wish to support the podcast a little bit financially, you can. Links for that in the written description of this podcast. Also, we can't do this without sponsors and companies that support the podcast. We greatly appreciate all the companies that support us. We can't do it without you. We want to say a big thank you to them. Don't forget, everybody, we have in the written description links, affiliate links, coupon codes. Some are just links to the places where you can buy them. If you do buy them from a small place like Clinic RC, just let them know that you heard about it on the No Name RC podcast, please. And a big shout out and thank you to Invisible Speed, High Tech RC, Corsatec USA, Sidewinder Fuel, Beach RC, Techno RC, Clinic RC, Stacked RC, Racecraft USA, Elite RC Productions. A big shout out to to Call RC. Just saw their ad on. You can use that promo code, save some money. Big shout out to Donovan RC as well. We have a promo code where you can save some money for that. And big shout out to all those companies. If you're a company and you wish to support the podcast in 2025, let me know. Or the rest of this quarter, we can do it. Let us know. But definitely for 2025. A big shout out to our drivers, David Runafalk, Robert Battier, Alexander HagBerg, who came third at the Euros here recently, Matty G, Pekko Ivan, and Una Hutton, and Mason Footler. Pekko is with JQ at the 40-plus Euros. So a big thank you to them. A shout out to our affiliates as well. We have a couple of affiliate companies in that written description for coffee, We have Dirty Asses Engine Services in there as well. A whole bunch of stuff in there. Don't forget, Get Shit Done Coffee. That's right. Frank South. Thank you. A big shout out to them. RC Box Club, all those guys are in there. There's our affiliate companies. Please show them support. Showing them some love shows the podcast some love. Yep, you know how it goes. All right. So I was trying to get Mayfield on. We've been trying to get Mayfield on for a few weeks now. Our schedules have been clashing. I figured he was going to Mugen Challenge. He's not at the ENATS, which is going on right now. As I'm recording this, I just made a post about the ENATS, and my post is not about the track. It's about the ENATS. I think that the e-buggy and truggy classes should be combined with the nitro classes because the ENATS, unfortunately, is not having a good turnout. Yes, I know Mugen Challenge was huge last weekend, but it's coming to a point where these people can't get to these Royal Nationals. Too many Royal Nationals. They got to cut it on. I think there should only be 110 scale national too, not carpet and dirt. It seems not to be working either. So anyway, but that's something Max and I will rant about next week because we are going to have a full podcast next week. We're supposed to have a 4-person panel next week. It's going to be a Worlds preview, and we are looking forward to it. As you know, Max and I are both going to the Worlds to do some NNRC content. I want to thank all the sponsors that made that happen. We will be announcing them very shortly. We'll have JQ on next week as well, and we'll hear about how he did after the 40-plus years. But next week, it's all about Worlds, and we're going to have it should be me, Cade, Max, and JQ. So let's see how that's going to work. I'm going to have to mute JQ. I'm pretty sure of this. But anyway, this week on this podcast, we have Joel Johnson. Now, I interviewed the Magic Man maybe at the beginning of this year, and I was supposed to release this while I was on the road in America a few weeks ago, last month, and I just didn't get around to it, so I just held it off. Wasn't able to get a time with Mayfield, so I just thought I'd release it. Max and everybody wanted to do the Worlds podcast next week, which I think is great because it's a week before. So in this podcast, it's just a one-off interview with Joel Johnson. I actually have to give some props to the gentleman at Action RC, which is a podcast out of Australia. He is super very knowledgeable about history of RC. Like when I say history of RC, like back in the 80s. So he came out watching Joe, and he has a podcast with Joe. It's split into 2 parts. I actually listened to that twice to learn more about Joel Johnson and all that stuff and what he done. So it was a good chat with him. I hope you guys enjoy it. And I just, another one-off interview. So next week, it should be a long, informative, debatable podcast, which we're known for. So we look forward to that. We will be asking for questions for that. But for now, enjoy the interview of Joel Johnson, brought to you by Techno RC.
Techno RC. Techno RC is a championship-winning manufacturer of high-performance 8-scale, 10-scale, nitro, and electric RC buggies and trucks. With a worldwide dealer network, USA and Europe-based headquarters, comprehensive warranty program, and global race support, Techno RC is excellence in RC. View the full lineup of Techno RC race-proven vehicles by visiting www.technorc.com.
Joining me in the virtual studio, it's been some time, but another legend to RC, Mr. Joel Magic Johnson. Is it Magic Man or is it Magic? What did they call you?
I'll answer to anything. Both were used extensively.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you for joining us. I know we've been trying to do this for a couple of weeks, but thank you. It's good to have you on. I've been doing some research on you. I've been listening. I want to state these podcasts right off the bat because they were very good. They get information about you. Action RC with the guy from Australia, very good. I've listened to that twice. RIP. Radio Impalm podcast with Gotti and Kirby Hand from a couple years ago. Yeah. And then just listening to Josh Sherrill talking to you, and you guys were geeking out on 8-scale racing a couple of years ago. And Scotty Ernst, I just listened to an interview you did with him. Yeah. At the Champions race, I believe.
Yeah, I've done a few, so I'm trying to remember. That was recently. Over the summer. Yeah, it was in the fall, I think. Yeah, last year. Yes. Yeah.
So absolutely, it's a pleasure to have you on. Your 5-time national champion. 34.
Yeah, right there.
34, about that, give or take one. 2-time world champion. You was the face of Trinity for many, many years. A legend. who raced various different classes throughout his career. And I appreciate having you on. But first of all, how did you get the name Magic?
Wow, I believe it came from Competition Plus. I think I won the nationals at the Ranch Pit Shop, and at the same time is when Magic Johnson had come into the NBA as a Laker, and obviously Competition Plus was located in Southern California, so they dubbed me RC Racing's Magic Johnson. And, it kind of stuck, obviously, and actually Trinity tried to. Well, they did trademark the name, which was then subsequently canceled by the actual Magic Johnson.
That sounds like something that Ernie would do. He was a basketball. Of course.
Yeah. All right. But I do have a plaque that says I trademarked that, so it's pretty.
Well, cool. I mean, most people will, call you Magic Man or Magic. Joel Johnson, icon, legend. I want to start. I always ask people where you started, but you started back in 1975. You was young, very young.
Yeah, 8 years old, basically. Yeah, so no electric cars at that point. It was just nitro powered 049 nitro power cars. Yeah.
Was it one of these right here?
Exactly. That was it right there.
Oh, that's cool. The Jerobi 0.049. If you're listening to this or actually looking at it, it has the engine right on the back. Was that the clutch right there?
That's a clutch. Yeah, it's a clutch. And it actually had a tie wrap. It had a tie wrap, if you look on the bottom one, as the brake. If you scroll all the way down, you can look on the left side of the car.
Okay, hold on, let me...
I don't know if you could get there, but yeah, they were pretty... Yeah.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah. So that was the clutch bell. It was actuated by the servo with some crazy bent piece of piano wire that.
Oh man, that's so basic.
And those servos travel at about 1 second, travel. It's incredibly slow. So,
but this was like the best thing you could get. Well, I would say like fully packaged back in the day. I heard you say,
yeah,
this is back in the, yeah.
It's it went from this to then taking that yellow brick, as we called it, the brick radio out of the car and using like Futaba individual servos. And then pretty much soon after is when the first electric cars came about, probably late 75, early 76.
Okay. So why did you, tell us a little bit how this came about, how you got the Jerobi. I think your dad had a hobby shop at that time.
Exactly. Yeah. My father, we owned a hobby shop in Santa Clara, California. And my dad was actually into model boating quite heavily. He actually founded the North American Model Boat Association, which is kind of the roar of model boating, if you will, in the US. So, I liked the cars, he liked the boats. And so he gave me a car to go play with. And, with the nitro engine, though, he always had to be around because those 049s were pretty difficult to keep running. Not exactly the most reliable engines in the world. So, but as soon as the electric cars came around, that's when it kind of took off for me, because he could just send me out in the parking lot, in the backside of the parking lot, and let me just run my car around until it ran out of charge. So,
well, let's talk about a hobby shop back in the 70s. Was it a big one like we saw today, like one of the smaller ones that you had a lot of these type of kits, model airplanes and stuff like that? Yeah,
we were full service, I guess, hobby shop. So we had arts and crafts, we had model trains, we had models, and we had radio control. Obviously not nearly the size in terms if the radio control department as it would be today for a hobby shop. But lots of model boat parts, and then the car side. I mean, back then there was probably just a few brands of cars. You had Jerobi, MRP, Leisure. These are all names. Probably everybody's like, "What is that?" But those were the brands. Thorpe Racing, and then Associated eventually came around very quickly with their RC12. So this people that aren't watching this, look up Jerobi. It's spelled with a Gerobe. It's one on eBay, actually. This is the one I'm looking at. Yeah, so, JRB with the J, actually. J-E-R-O,
with JRB. Yeah. And you'll see what we're talking about. If not, check into the podcaster that we're doing this. All right. I did hear that your father was into RC boats. I'm actually into RC boats too. I have one right behind me. I have a couple. If he was into RC boats, you knew he never had one. He had quite a few. We could never have enough boats.
Exactly. They were everywhere.
But you really didn't have too much interest in that, or did you get drug off to the races a lot when you was younger as well?
I grew up at a model boat pond, basically. So I raced model boats with my dad, raced sailboats with my dad, and really all started about the same time. As soon as I was able to, hold a transmitter and know what the heck I was doing. Yeah, my dad had me racing model boats, a mono, all the, some OPC outboard, that type of stuff. So.
Oh yeah, this is nitro boats. My buddy.
Yeah, nitro boats.
My buddy Sean, he races that leg lake as well. He's mostly into gas boats. So I heard you mention that, and that your dad actually won a championship back in 1992. So that's cool.
Yeah, at Leg Lake. Yeah, so it was a great experience. It was really fun. So
absolutely. But RC boats is a lot older than what we're doing in RC cars. It's just not got the exposure that RC racing has, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, the problem is you need a lake, so you can't just flop it.
Yeah, I'll be honest. It's also not really getting a lot of young new people in it, like what we are in our sport. So it's still a lot of older gentlemen holding on to their secrets, and they're not going to let them go. So it's racing, right? All right. So moving on, you got this Jerobi car. I think you started racing outside in a parking lot. And you quickly, it sounded like in the interview that quickly the hobby blossomed after in the parking lot there.
Yeah, our hobby shop was basically centered in the middle of Silicon Valley, and so we had two electrical engineers come in and present us basically an electric RC car that they built based on a JRB chassis, and they had a solid state speed control. They're called Electrocraft Speedos. And that's kind of where we saw our first electric car. Now, the kind of really at the same time, maybe even a little sooner, there were resistor controlled speed controls that people had seen where it's a servo with a wiper arm on a resistor. Yes. So those from Leisure, a little bit MRP, those would started to be released as well. Bowlink, I think, another company that had done it. So that's really where we started. We saw that, and my dad would kind of designed a quickie chassis, not based on the JRB car, because that wasn't the chassis was actually Lexan on a JRB car. It's pretty brittle, somewhat strong, but just brittle. So we developed a aluminum front end, rear end, and a Kydex chassis, which is very flexible. Excuse me. But and we made our own RC car called my dad's hobby shop was called Hobbies Galore. So it was called the HG Special. So we started HG Special. Yeah. So we raced, we started, in a way manufacturing those, putting the Electrocraft speed controls, Futaba brown box radios in them. And and then started racing in our parking lot out, in front of the hobby shop. And within, I would say, a year, we're getting over 100 entries for just 12 scale electric. There was no, the cars were basically all the same. We just had expert, amateur, beginner type classes, and then that morphed into modified and stock racing and this and that. But we were getting well over 100 entries for years, racing in front of our hobby shop twice a month. And then we started taking it on the road, and other shops were getting involved in Northern California, and we traveled with the track and set it up. And it was a whole circuit. It's quite fun.
How was the RC scene up in NorCal in this time? Because it's always seemed to be a battle between NorCal and SoCal. SoCal has always seemed to have the bigger scene. Was it like that?
Yeah. Southern California always had the manufacturer, so it was that's a bigger scene. But we had really good racing. We had Kent Clausen, who's a past world champion, came from NorCal. Myself, and then going forward, there's been a lot of good drivers coming out of NorCal, even off-road drivers. I'm blanking right now. I'll come up with it in a minute. But sure. Yeah, NorCal had a really strong scene with the racing, and we used to have a north-south challenge. We'd meet in Monterey, which was kind of halfway, somewhat, not really halfway, but so we'd meet in Monterey and all the associated guys in the which basically was Southern California. It would come up and we'd have a north-south challenge, which is.
I bet you was some epic racing going on in those days, like in those early 80s. And,
it really was.
Especially during the AE and Team Losi wars of the 90s and off-road and all that type of stuff. It must have been hectic. I mean, awesome. All right. So as you start racing more in the 70s and stuff, when do you kind of say, okay, this is something we're good at, we're going to pursue? What is next for you after that?
So I guess it'd be right around 81. I ran my first. There was a national championship in Fremont, California, which is Northern California.
Okay.
Only like 30 minutes from where we lived in San Jose and Santa Clara. So I raced that. I was at that point got sponsored by MRP, which Gary Kais, who a lot of people know him from Team Losi, who was a Team Losi guy for years. He was a rep for MRP. He sponsored me. I was 11 or 12 years old. So that was kind of my first major event, national event. And I did okay. I think I made B mains. I think it was Ralph Birch's first nationals as well. So Ralph Birch was the Jeremy Joe Mack, like up and coming ace, if you will. And I was MRP's up and coming ace, so, and those two companies, MRP and Jeremy, were both located, I believe, in Washington. And so they had this rivalry between the companies. And so it was whose new kid was going to beat who. And so that's kind of where it started. And the following year, that was 1980. And then 81 I traveled to Ratty's Raceway back in Massachusetts for that national event. Then that's in between there is where I got hooked up with Trinity through a mutual friend through our hobby shop. And Trinity was East Coast company. We're all the way on the West Coast, but we had a customer that was very much into slot car racing, and that's where Trinity started. So Trinity was looking for people that they knew the West Coast is where a lot of business was, so they wanted somebody who could race their motors on the West Coast. And so my dad had a hobby shop, so it made sense to see if we could sell some motors through there. So that's kind of how that relationship got started. And then 81 at Ratty's was the first race I ran for Trinity.
Okay. So did you have what was testing like back then, early out in those days with those new motors? It must have took a long time too. Shipping stuff, was it as fast as it was?
Yeah, no, it took forever for stuff to get one place. It was all just USPS, maybe a little UPS. I don't know. I was too young. I don't know if I remember that, but yeah, they would send me motors and we would go out and run them, and, just making 8 minutes, everything was 12 scale. Then that was the key, right? Could you run 8 minutes, and then how fast would it go? So there were so many variables, and we had no idea what these variables were back then. All we knew is just keep taking winds off the motor until, you were dumping at 745, and then add a wind or change the gearing. That was basically our only two options. There was no matched batteries, which was big, obviously, in the 90s, but in the early 80s,
none of that stuff.
None of that stuff existed. I went to the race. Yeah, I went to the race with like 4 battery packs that I'd been racing locally in my club racing forever. We had no idea if a new battery is better than an old battery or whatever. So it was quite simple, but really fun and really competitive. But it was huge leaps going on, from race to race, and people figuring out what to do. And a lot of people doing a lot of different things. It's a lot like the full size racing back in the day, like Formula One, right? Formula One in the 70s, all the cars look different. Now they all look the same. So it was a fun era. It was really, really good time.
So after that trip over to the East Coast, Massachusetts, and racing at that race, how did things progress for you? Because in 81 they had a World. Did you do that as well?
I did not. No, it's too early for me. But at Ratty's at the race in Massachusetts at Ratty's Raceway, it's called. I won 2 of the 5 classes.
Okay,
second, third, and fourth in the other 3 as a 13-year-old. So that's kind of when Trinity goes, oh, this kid's pretty good. We want to get into racing, and that's where it really took off from there. And then 82, the next nationals was in Indianapolis, and I believe was it the Worlds?
Were they the year before?
I think it was 82. Was the Worlds in Anaheim, or is it 81?
81 was in Indianapolis, Indiana. 82 was Anaheim.
Okay, yeah. So I raced the Worlds in Anaheim, missed the main event, just had a bad luck. I had a wire wear through, my pinion wore through one of my power wires and, basically shorted out the car on my one run that was going well. So wasn't my best race. But at that race is where I met the Losies. They had just I believe they just bought the Ranch Pit Shop, if I'm not mistaken, and they were at the race seeing what was going on. And so that was my first time I met Pops, and the first time I met Gil Jr. Okay,
I want to rewind it. So when you went to Boston, did you meet Ernie as well?
I met Ernie. Yeah, I met Ernie in Boston. That was the first time I met him. I had Trinity Motors. They had sent me to race locally, and then I traveled to Boston. Actually ended up traveling there with Neil McCurdy, who was RevTech at the time, and then ended up working for Trinity much later on down the road. But and then Gary Keyes was kind of my chaperone. He was from Northern California. So anyways, I ended up flying out there and with the MRP guys, and that's when I first met Ernie, and Tony P was in at the race in Massachusetts because they were from New York and New Jersey, so they just drove in, and that was first time I'd ever met him. Here I am, a 13-year-old kid, and they're just wondering
what did he say? Do you remember how that first meeting went with him?
Yeah, well, I just remember trying to figure out. I knew I was supposed to go there, meet them, get some equipment, if you will, to put in my car for the race, and so it was always. So I kept asking, trying to ask around, and Gary Keyes just helped me, like, who's, do you know Ernie Prevetti is here, or this guy Tony P? That's all I knew is his last initial, because it was so hard to pronounce. Nobody ever used his whole last name. His last name was Przbilowicz, and so they called him Tony P. And Tony P at the time was a large man, like 400 pounds, big, 6'4", just huge human being. So everybody's like, oh, just look for the big guy. And I'm like, oh, and then I finally see him over in the corner sitting down, and I
can't mistake him then.
Can't mistake him. Yeah. And introduced myself, and, super nice guy. And that's where it started. And he's probably looking at me going, I can't believe we're giving this kid equipment. He's 13. What could he do? And
amazing.
But, it did work out.
Yeah. How long that went on for? Years and years and years. Then you said you met the Losies at the 82 World Championships.
Yeah.
And how was Anaheim. It? So, was Gil he's a little bit older than you, I believe?
Yeah, like 5 years, I think, 4 or 5 years. Yeah. So we kind of, I just met him. It's funny. He always tells the story. So I think I was playing ping pong at the time, here I am 14 or whatever I was in between races, this long race. So I'm playing ping pong and I get introduced to them, and according to Gil, I totally blew him off, which was probably the case. So, but that was kind of where we first got started. And then, I'm sure after that went to, I think 84 or 83 was the first big 12 scale race down in at the pit shop in Pomona. And that's where I started. I'd go there early for practice, and they were so nice to me, as they were to everybody, whatever I needed. And then Gil and I just kind of hit it off, and, as just friends, and I think we had like minds, and it became a relationship we've had ever since. So,
okay. But at this time, like you said, you're focusing on 12 scale. Obviously, you're doing, I assume, asphalt outdoor at 12 scale.
Exactly. Yeah.
No real carpet racing going on at this time.
I think not much. I'd run maybe at Cleveland by then was maybe the first carpet race I'd ever run in '83. So about the same, that whole era right there. Yeah.
Now it's like complete opposite. It's all carpet, very little is not much asphalt at all. Right. All right. So you're focusing on 12 scale. You're now you're in with Trinity. You're getting older as well, 14 now, you're with the Losties. I don't know how the whole Kyosho thing came about. Where did that come from after you're running MRP and all that?
So Kyosho's a lot later. And that's really Kyosho deal came through Trinity. So Trinity at the time was using Kyosho, what they call at the time teardowns, meaning the guts of the motor, the armature and the can and the end bell were Kyosho, and then Trinity would wind the armatures and do their own tricks to it and sell it as a Trinity motor, but it was a Kyosho based motor. So there was a relationship between Kyosho and Trinity. And so in 80, I guess it had been maybe late 86, they had approached Trinity and said, would Joel consider running off-road?
Okay.
And I said, sure, I'd never run it, but I'll try it. Yeah. And so that's kind of how it got started. So Trinity negotiated all the details. I got sent Ultimas, and started racing them in Northern California and doing my own tricks to it. As back then, first thing you do is put a graphite chassis on everything, because they were just pan chassis. They weren't nearly as sophisticated as they are now. And I just started running locally, really had no expectations. There was nowhere to learn from. It was just go out and practice and see what you can do. I ran the Nationals that year just before the Worlds. Didn't do all that well. A lot of guys didn't run the Nationals that year because they were prepping for the Worlds, because I think it was only like a 2-week span between the two. I think I made the Nationals, but it really wasn't anything spectacular. And then, off to the Worlds we go with just a few months under my belt, if that, with the Kyosho Ultima, which was kind of a whole new car at that point. Just released. The year before, I think 85 was that. No, hold on. They won that 85. Didn't Jay win that? 87. Yeah, 85 was right. Down in San Diego at the Losie's track. And,
right. So Jay won that, and Gil Losi won with he won 4-wheel drive. I guess Kyosho was kind of under or had that we want to bring out a 10 scale car. Did you have any other notable teammates to learn from on Kyosho when you picked up the car?
Nobody close to me. I mean, Chris Moore from Southern California, who now runs Mugen USA. He was the only other American driver at that time. And then it obviously grew after 87 Worlds, but there really wasn't much. Kyosho hadn't hit the scene yet. So it was basically all RC10s at that point, with a few, maybe some Cox Scorpions, which was a Kyosho car, Cox rebranded.
Yeah, absolutely. But old school type of buggy compared to the RC10s. Now, you went over to the UK. Was this your first time leaving the America at this point, or had you been previously before that?
No, that was first time going overseas.
Oh, okay.
So it's very exciting and interesting, and driving on the other side of the road, etc.
You was 18 at this time, though, right? You was 18.
Yeah, I was drive. I didn't drive then, but
you could party in England because you're 18.
You could have a beer or two. So yeah.
And Jamie Booth was one of the. I think he was another young English hotshot. We had him on the podcast. He has some epic stories as well.
Great guy. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome guy. And this was in. Let me bring it up here. I have it in. Romsey, England. Whereabouts is Romsey? Like, where would you fly in back in those days?
Well, I think it was I could fly into Heathrow or Gatwick. There's another airport called Gatwick, which was a little closer but smaller. And the only reason I remember that is because I think the guy that was running the event was pretty on edge, and every time somebody would do something wrong or do something he didn't like, he would just tell them, Gatwick is that way if you don't like it. And he'd point, off in the distance, and it was quite funny. Yeah. So
really, so it must have been a bit of a shock for you as your first time leaving America, going to a World Championships in off-road, a discipline that you've really not participated in.
Yeah,
heavily.
I mean,
to this
not
point.
heavily. It was just off and on races before Kyosho, and then we get there, and the track so different than the U.S. tracks, which actually worked in my favor, but much harder surface, multi-surface. They had actually had poured oil on parts of the track to soften the dirt up, and not many jumps, which also worked in my favor. It's not my forte, jumping RC cars. So it was a little bit of a serendipity.
Some video here from A-leg, from the first leg of. Oh my gosh!
You could see the dirt flying off the back tires, which doesn't happen anymore. You can almost.
Oh man, people in RC would melt nowadays if they had to race on something like this. Intense scale.
Exactly. It's cars had very little traction. You were just sliding them around, and it was pretty crazy. So Kyosho had come to the race really prepared. They had a huge team from the in Europe and in Asia, and they had brought multiple different sets of tires, and actually the first time I think anybody had seen tires in different rubber compounds, and that was a pretty big advantage for us going into the race. It just having that option and never having it before. You're always trimming knobs and trying to figure out how to get traction. No Sire sauce at that time. Nobody knew what that was in off-road. I mean, we were using it in electric cars and on foam tires, but we never thought about putting it on actual rubber tires. So it was, a lot of things happening at that event. But that was Masami's first Worlds, and he won the 4-wheel drive end of it. So it was, pretty cool. As you can see, we got spectators too, which is pretty awesome.
Spectators here. You was definitely in a class with a bunch of legends, Masami, Jamie Booth, these type of guys. Masami's first Worlds. What did you run in 4-wheel drive then at this race?
It's Optima.
Okay, so the Optima 4-wheel drive as
Optima
well.
I think it was
I think I had one of them.
Yeah,
but in the 90s.
Yeah, so and I didn't really run 4-wheel drive. Wasn't that where I was? It was mostly 2-wheel drive class, and so that was kind of one of the first times I'd run a 4-wheel drive car. But I did like how they ran because they're much more like a road race car. Obviously, more traction. With
4-wheel drive.
Yeah, more responsive.
So what did you do when you what type of celebration did you have when you won 2-wheel drive over in the UK?
We had so Kyosho really over the years, I mean, one of the best companies to run for back then. I mean, just a growing company. So we had quite a big celebration at their hotel. They rented a ballroom. We had a catered meal and all the the entire Kyosho team from around the world obviously invited with the sponsors and everything. So it was really cool, actually. I mean, I remember going to that. I also went to we had a really great dinner with Trinity, and I think we had the rep from Sanyo was there. Sanyo was such a big sponsor of all these events back then because those were really the batteries we were using. So, but yeah, we had it just, really Kyosho always first class organization since day one and put on a great, huge, shindig, if you will, for all the racers around the world. And then I had a great dinner with Trinity, like we always would do after big wins. And it was a little surreal, going there. I had obviously there were expectations on me, but I was like, I'm just going to follow. And, I really had no idea what I was getting into. I just hadn't had enough experience and just kind of ended up looking, asking what other guys were doing and made a few changes here and there, but I was really just more interested in driving the track as much as I could. And because I really wasn't feeling the changes in the car, and just ended up all of a sudden, here we are on pace at the end of qualify, or, at the practice, and just, too young to not know I shouldn't be doing well at that race. Right? So you just go ahead and just do it.
I mean, you was already at a superstar status, but that launched you to a whole nother stratosphere, I would say, at that point.
Agreed. Yeah. That win, immediately, because, I think it was Great Plains, who was the importer for Kyosho, put out an ad that said Kyosho Ultima next world champion.
So pressure was on.
Yeah, that's pretty, ballsy, if you will. And, so here we are over there trying to win and back that up, and we did. And and they promoted the heck out of it, and I had posters and autograph signings, and it just, really fun, really, really fun time. And
RC Rockstar at that point,
right?
Magazine shot. Wearing the Kyosho, that Kyosho jacket, the white. Let me see. I had it on picture.
I still have.
Wearing that
I should have
jacket.
wore it. I should have wore it for the interview.
Man, hey, here we go. I'll see if I can bring it up. But just good times in RC. You win this. You fly back home to NorCal. I assume your life got really busy after that. What was the progression after that?
Yeah. Well, I still was doing a full schedule of, the road racing, and but then now it was, the Reedy Race of Champions coming up. So now I would run the off-road version of that, because, at that point, I think there was only an off-road version of that. So go to the Reedy Race. And then I wasn't hitting every event for off-road because I had so many on-road obligations, but and I think at the time, Great Plains was putting on a series of their events, and I'm trying to think of the timing, but I think that's about the time the Kyosho Burns came out, the 8-scale off-road car. So I was really that might have been maybe 89 or 90, but I was running I was running off-road, but mostly I was still back in on-road. And then when the 8-scale Burns came out, I was doing a lot of promotion, running races for Kyosho with that. There wasn't much racing, so Kyosho was actually putting on their own events, with Great Plains to try to promote that 8-scale off-road class. So I was one of the first guys to have an 8-scale off-road car in the United States. Yeah, really? Yeah. So not that in it, but again, my on-road stuff always trumped it. It was so busy with that. I never really had time to kind of devote enough time to off-road to get really competitive in it.
So when we're talking on-road, we're talking 12 scale,
10 scale,
and
at the time,
just electric.
An oval. Yeah, an oval was going big at that time too. So running all those disciplines, not much time for off-road, which was
paved oval, right?
Paved oval, yeah,
yes.
Exactly.
So I have a question. What was it like as a young guy planning all this? Who did all your travel planning and all that type of stuff? It's not like today where everything's in the touch of your phone. You have an app for this, Google Maps for this, pay everything like that. Like traveling, I travel quite a lot. It is stressful just traveling nowadays. Imagine back then as a younger man, traveling wasn't as easy as it was. What was your schedule like? What was a normal month for you?
Let's see when I was 17, 18, just ready to go off to college. I mean, I was gone once a month racing, for about a week at a time. All the travel plans were done by Trinity. I kind of give them, they tell, well, let's, we need you to be in at this time and we'll fly you out at this time. And I say, okay, I had San Jose Airport or San Francisco were the two airports by me. So I did quite a bit of flying. I was at the upper echelon of the mileage clubs at that point, which was great, always. So it was quite busy. Yeah. My parents, driving me to the airport, and then eventually myself just leaving my car at the airport and being a lot more self-sufficient. And
no, you was doing this full time, right? RC was your So salary and
I first started getting paid basically right out of high school, because at that point I had said I'm going to going to college. So I'm kind of done with racing. And that's what Trinity's like, whoa. You can't do that. This would have been 1988, 87. And I said, well, I got to go to college. I got to get a job, and so I can pay for this stuff, and, because nobody's getting paid then. You got maybe bonuses here and there for a win, but nothing official. And it was just discretionary on their part. And so, they got together, and Trinity with all the other sponsors, Novak and TRC and things. So they put a package together for me to get paid to race RC cars full time, which pretty much the first guy to ever get paid to do it full time.
I would say so.
Yeah, other people worked at factories and obviously got to go racing, but I was a guy not near any of the factories, just basically racing RC cars for a living. Yeah.
Okay. So you just had to be it was on your own accord to go out there and practice and put in time and testing and whatnot.
Exactly. Which was tough because there was, basically we had no permanent tracks or anything. So it's just club racing and parking lots and things at that point. So
pretty amazing. At 17 years old, that's like a dream job, I would say. Traveling around.
It is. It was. But it was a dream job, but it was also what I'd been doing since I was 13.
Right.
Traveling. So it really was no different. It was just that I was now getting a paycheck and I could move out. I could get my own place with a couple of roommates and really start to be an adult, if you will.
All right. And then so let's move forward a little bit. You go to your second Off-Road Worlds, I believe, which was in Australia.
Yes.
Which was a very interesting Worlds. Had a tree in the middle of it. I remember looking at some video from this.
I hit the tree.
You hit the tree?
Yeah, that was one of those corners you had to commit to, and if you did it wrong, you'd climb the tree.
Now, did you go into this Worlds with any added pressure of already having won already?
Not really, because at that point, again, I'd won. I'd done a lot. I'd really gone back to on-road racing and was just running off-road here and there. So, and there were a lot of other drivers that had come on to the Kyosho team that maybe, especially European guys, that were really expected to do well, if you will. And, the Losi car had come out by then. There's a lot more competition car-wise. And so, you always have pressure on yourself, but I was kind of going in, we had known Masami had been at that track for, the rumors were weeks, practicing and this and that. And, you just go in and go, well, how are we going to compete against that? We knew how good he was, obviously. And we're like, that's going to be interesting. And then when we get there, we see, after the first practice, we look at the tires. Yokomo had tires that no one had ever seen or thought about doing, these really mini pin, very dense tread pattern for a hard surface that they had there. And it was, it was like either you were skating on ice, which we all were with the tires that we had, or you were with Masami, running a Yokomo tire that was basically wheeling down the straightaway, So how I'd made the final was it rained one night before the last round of qualifying. So all of a sudden the track softened up, and all the tires that we had brought and known worked. So we all got good race. Yeah, we all got good times in to make the main event. For those of us that didn't have Yokomo tires. Now, look at that hair. I wish I
there are you. That's a perfect haircut right there.
Yeah, that's it. So so it was, again, the track, it was, very hard surface, almost like a clay surface. Now it'd be very normal, beautiful track. Beautiful park, really nice setup that the Australians had. Just very different than what, we were used to as Americans. We were still running on fluffy, soft tracks. And so that was where the handout tire concept, this is what sparked it, because if you weren't on Yokomo tire, you weren't going to win the race. And Yokomo would hand the tires out to their guys, and then once a race, your heat was done, they'd collect the tire back so nobody could see what they were, etc. So that's
how was it accepted by the racers having a handheld tire?
Well, I mean, if you had them, it was great. If you didn't, we were all complaining, right? You're like, "Oh, this is not fair." But I mean, yeah, but they did the homework, and then so it's well within the rules. So it wasn't really that. You could see the tracks back then were so flat, right? Just like two bumps on them, and nowhere near like what they have now, where the cars are in the air more than they're not. So,
it's still rough. It's rough in areas. It's got bumps, and the shock. I would assume that the suspension wasn't as advanced as it was last year, as it is now.
Yeah.
So it was sufficient for the suspension components that you had.
Exactly. Yeah. It was. Yeah. I mean, if we, the tracks don't get nearly as rutted, and the cars didn't have the power to tear it up like they do now. Especially like an 8-scale off-road. That's they can tear up tracks pretty quickly. So. But I think this was Associated. I think had their one of their the new long arm cars there, and so it was interesting. Every race there was some pretty big advancements in the chassis. I think Losi at the time they kind of knew there was this tire controversy coming up. Everybody had heard, so I think they brought narrowed up. Monster truck, the stadium truck tires, trying to see if they could get the rear traction that we thought Masami would have. And they, it was kind of a loophole in the rules. I think ultimately they banned it because it did look ridiculous, but I also think it didn't, the tires were so big. It just, kind of messed up the ride height and everything. So, but they tried it. They brought something that they were going to see if it worked or not.
Well, and I made a mistake and said this was 91. This was 89. 91 was in America. Well, what we are noticing here is that cars are starting to take a look. All these cars are starting to look very similar, and this is kind of how it would develop. For all the cars, if you look at 87, you can see it's different looking type of cars, some off brands, but now we see more of a factory style car. Like it looks like they all look the same. And look at Masami's car again, and this is 4-wheel drive. But beautiful action here down in Australia. That's where we're going in 2025. I hope it's well attended. And I heard that it's going to be an outdoor Lermy type of track as well. I don't know if it's going to be Lermy. I heard it's going to be dusty.
Yeah, well, that'd be great. I think it's, the manicured tracks. I mean, that's what everybody's used to, but it'd be fun to change it up and make everybody, think a little and try to change their program. It would certainly shake it up and see if there's something new that comes about, because racing's gotten a little stale, like it always does. If you don't change rules, everybody will land on the same package, And, so it's been same rules for a long time, so it doesn't surprise me. As we get going, all the cars are looking the same, and if somebody has something
absolutely. We also see emergence of Craig Drescher when he was young and coming onto the scene. Did you think that he was going to be as legendary as he was when he came on the scene at that young age? Just probably a little bit older than him. Yeah,
I'm a little bit older than him. But he was really good from the start, and great guy, funny guy. So you could see it. The moment wasn't too big for him, at these races. And so you definitely could see that it's another guy you'd have to beat to win the races.
So around this time, I assume started the Pro 10 chassis, the Pro 10, which is basically a 10-scale pan car.
Right. Yeah. So that 90s, I guess, early 90s. Late, yeah. So I think the first Pro 10 car I saw was it had been an oval car. Like, I think it was, Composite Craft was making one.
Okay.
And then a Bull-Link. And then eventually, as this class looked like it was getting more popular, and that's when the Associated 10L came out. And then we started that. I think it was oval cars that really started that, the 10 scale oval cars, way back before. I mean, they're still running foam tires on them. And then it morphed into running them on-road racing. Now, I could be off on that. This is so long ago.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember, but
it's a segue, because in 1992, you go into this to win your second world championship with the Trinity Evo 10. There's a funny story about this. I think he was trying, if I'm not mistaken, was it at this race he was trying two different cars?
Right. Yeah. So I'd showed up at the time I was racing an Associated 10L car, and that's what we'd run previous. We had, I'd started with the composite craft cars. We'd gone from there to the 10Ls, T-bar setup. And so I've been running that for a year, brought the car. That's what I prepped for, everything, show up, go to practice. And I heard a little bit before that I went to the race that Jim Dieter, who had helped, was somewhat a mechanic and a mentor, if you will, car setup wise and stuff for us at Team Trinity and for myself, that he was building something different. Jim was always thinking outside the box, if you will. There's always a better way to do things. So, and Ernie's like, he built a new car and I want you to try it at the Worlds. And I'm just like, this is not the time for brand new chassis, right? that have never turned a wheel on a track. I'm like, no. He's like, look, he's flying in. Go pick him up at the airport, and you got to try the car. And I'm like, okay, I'll go. I'll try the car. So he flies in so I'd been practicing 2 days, I think, by then. So he comes in that day, like on the second day, I go pick him up. The airport's really close to the track. We come back to the track. He shows me the car. It looks nothing like anybody's ever done. It looks cool. But I'm like, wow, okay, let's see what we do. So put a receiver in it, tuned my radio to it, go out in one of the practice runs. And secretively, nobody saw what was underneath the body, run it. It wasn't immediately ballistic, but it showed promise, and it was competitive. And that's, talk to Ernie. Ernie's like, well, if it's competitive, I want you to run it because we want to get into the car business. And, this is how we're going to do it. So we need to run that car if it could be, it'll work. So I said, well, I think it's close. So it's up to Jim to get it the rest of the way there. I'll just put my input on what it's doing or not doing and let him work his magic. And, so we ran it, and not many people knew we had that until qualifying. We'd really kept it a secret. And then I'd run my 10L every once in a while, and I'd run that car. And, it was hard to keep things a secret back then because we were all pitting, right next to each other. But we did. And basically the rest is history. We did, that track was one of my favorite tracks to race at. It just had whatever the feel with the asphalt and the traction levels and everything just gelled with my driving style. And was able to come away with my second world championship.
How big was this class at this time? Would you compare it to?
It was big. I think it was getting ready to overtake 12 scale in popularity, and it was kind of the focus in on-road electric. And then I think, because really for outdoor racing, especially at that point, I think 12 scale was really starting to look at an indoor only class, 4 cells. And, the only time it ever was run outdoors was at a nationals. We had an outdoor nationals, and then they had 4-cell indoor nationals, but the 12 scale was really viewed as an indoor, type of racing at that point. So the only outdoor racing for electric was Pro 10.
So touring car kind of killed this class, I would say.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It was, so the touring car, once the touring cars came out, independent suspension, all that, it's like, at first, again, it's another class that Tamiya started. Tamiya was the first to really get the off-road 10 scale going electric. And then Tamiya comes out with their first touring car, 4-wheel drive, and that, this thing, we all kind of looked at it, oh, that's a toy, haha. And then they ran around the track, you're like, oh, that looks pretty fun. They worked really well, and you're like, oh, this might be something, and then it obviously grew from there. But yeah, so the touring car, once we had a couple different chassis choices, the 10 scale really went away.
Oh yeah, unfortunate. It's like, I remember guys talking about a 21, like an ONROAD class, very similar, no shocks for pan car, 21cc engine, direct drive. It was like, if you could drive that, you could drive anything.
I raced those. So at that first nationals in 81 in Fremont, I MRP made 8-scale cars, and that's what Gary Kais was very much into the nitro side of things. So he built me a car and I raced that class. And yeah, that's exciting. Those things hopped and bounced and were just skittish down the straightaway like crazy. So yeah.
All right. Also, you said that earlier on, I just wanted to go back to that. You was one of the first people to get the Turbo Burns cars. And
yeah.
I know you said you also went to Thailand for a Nitro World Championship. Was that with 8-scale off-road?
Yes, 8-scale off-road. I believe that was, I don't know if it's the first. I think it was the second World
Probably
Championship.
Was. It's 1990, it looks like. Yeah, 1990.
Yeah, so I think 88, it was in France, I believe, possibly. So anyway, so yeah, I went there with Gary Kais and raced the Kyosho Burns. I don't even think it was a Turbo Burns at that point. It was just a Burns.
Did it have a wing on it?
It had a wing. It had a wing. So maybe it was a turbo. Yeah. So, I don't know. Was it? Or maybe it was an Inferno by then.
Might have been.
I have to look at that.
Might have been a Turbo Burns, I think.
Might have been a Turbo Burns. So we went over. Again, we'd only raced, in the U.S. amongst those of us from the U.S. So we had the Europeans and Japanese, especially, much farther ahead in the whole thing. And I think I made the semifinal in that. Had a rock jam into my flywheel and kill the car in the semi. I don't know if I would have transferred. Yeah, and the track got so bumpy. And this was the first instance where I saw a track deteriorate to the point where the straightaway was no longer a straightaway. You actually had to work around the potholes to go down the straightaway. So there was no straight line. And it must
have been so difficult, 8-scale nitro back then. Off-road.
It was the engines weren't, 21 engines weren't that reliable back then. We had, it was, I'm trying to think what else other issues we had.
Heavy suspension break-in, all that type of stuff.
All that stuff. And it was extremely hot in Thailand, hot and humid, which made the engines a little harder to tune. The track to me was immense. I mean, just a giant track. I mean, I think now it probably would be similar, to size, but back then I'd never seen a track that large. And it was just amazing. I was like, whoa. It's like when you lose track of the car, like the sound of the car on the back straightaway, it drives me nuts because, you want to hear what your car's doing. And so that was a whole new experience there. Amazing event they put on and really had a great time.
You met the president there.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, he was there. He came to the opening ceremonies. He shook our hand as the American team, which was really an honor and really surprising. And it was great. And so I really thoroughly enjoyed the event. It was,
I like world championships, man. People who have never been to one, they'll, when they have the day where they present all the team drivers from different countries and all that stuff, and the amount of people, the world just has a different atmosphere on it. And back then, even more so, because it wasn't so open, where it was rare that you would meet people from different parts of the country unless you was doing for a specific event. So,
100%. Yeah, it was really fun to see all these other smaller countries that you were like, oh, I had no idea they raced there. We had no internet. The internet maybe just starting at that point, right? So there's just the information wasn't out there of where all this stuff was happening. It was really fun to see all these.
In these years, was you traveling to Europe and Asia a lot, or was it like?
I was Asia a couple times a year with Kyosho, and then Europe just for World Championship stuff. So if it happened to be there, I didn't do a lot of other big races in Europe, if you will, outside of World Championship stuff. Okay. So
now I have a question. Did you think that 8-scale nitro would catch on and be as big as it is now?
I don't know if I really thought about it then, but I would probably say no. I was probably such an on-road snob at that point. I'm like, how could all this, how could this work? Right. So I certainly had fun with the cars though. I did enjoy driving them. The weight of them, the 4-wheel drive, you could slide them around. They jumped easier. They're just everything was a little easier and less sensitive than the electric cars were. Right?
Did you revisit it anytime later in your career, like 8-scale off-road?
Not really until we had AKA, and they would every once in a while talk me into go racing, and then they'd all have a good laugh because the whole jumping thing. There were so many jumps on the track now. Just not my forte. I needed a lot of practice. I understand it.
Especially when those jumps are when they're way over the other side of the track and you can barely see your car. It's hard. It's hard.
It's
all
hard.
Right. So let's we're going back to the past, back to the future, 1990s. You're cracking. You decide to have another crack at off-road racing. This time in 1993, I think it was. Yes, in once again in the UK in Balsadon. Now I'm trying to find some video of this. Now tell us a little bit how this all came about, because you had stopped racing off-road for about 3 years. You was focused on-road, and then you got convinced to go down and race off-road.
Correct. Yeah. So team, obviously connected with Team Lefty at that point. Was racing their on-road stuff that they had, and so Gary Kai's a continuing theme through my life. One of my mentors here calls me maybe a month before the race and says, we want you to go to the Worlds in England. And I'm like, why? I haven't raced off-road in over a year and a half or 2 years. And he's like, well, we just like you to go. We think you could do something there. And I'm like, there's no way. I go, there's no way I'm doing anything there. This is silly. And then I said no. And then he calls back like in another couple days. He's like, have you thought about it? I'm like, yeah, I don't want to go. And he's like, no, we want you to go. He's like, you got to do this for me. We got to go. And I'm like, okay, all right, I guess I'll go to the Worlds. So I said, okay, I'll go to the Worlds. So we get signed up. I guess you get a past world champions, you get the provisional to get in. And I drive down to Southern California a week before the event, sit at the factory, build a car, help them with prep for the race. Back then, there's a lot of measuring, and we would size all the shock bodies identical, size all the pistons, things like that. So every car was identical as it could be, and a lot of that type of stuff. So helped with all that stuff. Built a car, practiced maybe a day and a half at, I think it was M&M. I can't remember, one of the tracks there. Is in Corona, California, and jumped on a plane with the Lefty crew and took off to Basildon to have another crack at racing a world championship. And look at that. Yeah, so cool. That's a lot of fun. And then, basically I glommed on to Jack Johnson, no relation. But we were friends, and I just said, Jack, I'm gonna follow you. I haven't run this chassis. I have no idea what to do with any of this. So he would rate. I went out with an initial setup we all had, and then I would tell him what I thought, and he said, well, I'm going to try this. And I'm like, okay, that sounds like the direction I want to go as far as what you're trying to make your car feel like. Made a few changes a couple times. Really wasn't feeling the change at all. And I said, that's it. I'm just going to go out and practice and just, again, do as many laps as I can on the track. And I remember after the last practice session, not really having a sense of what my lap times were compared to anybody else. I mean, I guess we had A and B back then, but you weren't hearing your times called out or anything. So I just remember Pops Lefty sitting. He was sitting on a hill in one of these turns, and I just remember after the session, I bring my car in and I look over because I knew that's where everybody was sitting, Ernie and all those guys, and he stands up and claps, and I'm like, I don't know what that means. Is he making fun of me? I don't know. And then I get back to the pit, and they're like, you're right on pace with everybody else. You're turning the fastest laps. And I'm like, really? Yeah. So again, really just the track suited my driving style. It was, you could be aggressive, but you really had to be careful. And I think, the way I drove 12 scale and things, where the throttle response and being very smooth on the throttle, it helped in this scenario. And it wasn't all about chassis setup, as much. And so there I was, right in the thick of it again. And it was
two-wheel drive.
Yeah, it was quite amazing. Yeah, I was just shocked. And I think, we obviously had a shot at winning that. It rained between A1 and A2, I think. And that really, we didn't know what to do in the rain. And the Associated guys, with all their guys in Europe and England especially, they had a lot more knowledge on what to do in the rain. And that second main, really, our car was out to lunch. We just didn't know what to do with the tires and what tires to run. And hey, I finished second to a legend. Not such a bad gig. And
Kinwald won it.
Kinwald, another RC legend, great person, and we all miss him. And but
he got it mad.
He was.
Yeah, we're just watching that. Was that oil? Did they put oil on that track? Because it looks like they did.
I'm trying to think. They may have in one of the turns, but I don't think. I think that track was really just hard pack. You don't work on it; it just goes where it goes, and which just the way it should be. And I don't remember a multi-surface deal there. I think it was just black rubber on it from running so many laps on it. So
yeah, you can see the track's evolving as well. We're seeing more of a grooving surface coming in from the 1987 world. It was loamy, and then Australia was a little bit hard pack and dusty. This is more, it's hard pack and dusty, but also got a groove in it. And it's not, the jumps were not well formed. It was just more natural kind of feel to everything. Like this jump here was just difficult. The cars just didn't want to land right. It caught me out a few times. But yeah, this is really, I think, when the hard pack tracks kind of started becoming popular because, no maintenance and, just let it go, see where it goes. All right. So 1993, what does Joe Johnson start doing after this next Worlds? What's next for you going on? What are you doing in the world of RC?
After this race, it's really when, touring car was coming about, and that's, Losey's running their street weapon. And so on-road was kind of sitting there right with off-road because of the touring car scene as far as importance to these manufacturers. So I again, once this race was done, back to on-road. And this is the golden years of touring car. Touring car, yeah. So it's
outdoors, parking lot, good stuff.
Good stuff.
I think I wanted to ask this in the future about BNS. We did mention it. I think that was very beneficial to getting new people into racing. We looked at it in the 70s. You did it with your father and the Jerobi chassis. Now, fast forward, we're in the 90s. Yes, we're racing on a more professional manner. We have world championships, but at the core, getting those classes out there racing in front of people walking by was something very pivotal to getting people into RC. Something we don't do nowadays.
Exactly, hit it on the head. So the parking lot racing was really taking off again, and a lot of it was these touring cars, which had four-wheel independent suspension, four-wheel drive. They could run on surfaces that weren't perfect. You could raise the ride height, and get them to go around the track and have fun. And at that time too, they were also developing some of these really inexpensive pan car classes that with spec tires and things like that, trying to just make it easy for people to just buy a kit, go out, and you could go race in the parking lot in front of your hobby shop. And it's a shame that nobody's doing that anymore. I think a few shops, I'm sure, have figured out, boy, if you could get the space out there, if the center will let you take that space on a Saturday or Sunday, there's nothing better. We ran parking lot racing in Northern California in the 90s for 4 or 5 years. And we were getting, at this time, the nitro touring cars were starting to come out too, right? So You could run them on the same track. So we were getting 180 entries for a 1-day race, on a Sunday in Northern California. I mean, just crazy entry numbers to the point where we would race twice a month. Then we split it up. So it was electric once a month, nitro once a month, because the classes were, just getting so huge. And, but we were right on a corner of a major intersection, and people would stop and come in and look, and inevitably 1 out of 20 would go into the shop and buy something, so
absolutely.
It's just so important. Yeah,
absolutely. So you're in the golden years of touring car. You're a little older in your career now. You're racing against, obviously in this time, we're looking at guys like Barry Baker, Craig Dress, Spashett. I know you said that Neisinger, but this is in the 80s. He was one of your biggest arch rivals in 12 scale in the 80s.
Sure.
Who was your arch rival in touring car in 1990s on-road scene?
Ooh, there's a lot of guys.
It was big. It was huge.
It was big. Yeah, there was a ton of drivers. Cyril was one. Blackstock, Mike Blackstock was also very good. Barry Baker, obviously. Trying to think, when Mark Pavidis ran on-road, he was super fast. He's one of those guys that could go back and forth and be super competitive in both. And I'm trying to think who else. Just, I don't know. It was so popular. There was probably 8 or 9 guys that could win an event. And it was really the golden era. I think outside of 12 scale when it was growing, this was the next golden era. This touring car, things changing super fast, and just all the manufacturers hyper focused on it. When you went to a race, like with off-road back in the day, the guys who designed the car were at the race, and they were like a Losi or Cliff Lett, or, these guys were there managing the chassis for the team, if you will.
So in this time, I would say that we're seeing this serious decline of 12 scale as well.
Yeah, that was, again, 12 scale really becoming just indoor only. So Cleveland was still a big race, and the carpet side of it was still a thing, but no more, very little, if any, asphalt racing. Yeah.
None whatsoever. Just bringing up some of your pictures of your street weapon from back in the day.
Yeah. That was
we have the box. Here we go. Maybe this one here. All right. So touring cars booming. You got racing going on. I guess you're getting up. Did you? I wasn't sure if you did this, but did you go over to the East Coast to work at some point as well?
I had. I did it in the late 80s. I did it for a year, and then came back, worked for Trinity for a year, and then went back to the East Coast after. This was in 2000, so I'd kind of already stopped racing, retired, if you will. Ended up on the East Coast, and then with a tech company, and then ended up back at Trinity once the internet crash, if you will, hit with the whatever that was, 2000.
Okay.
So yeah. Anyways,
I guess after the touring car is going on, when does I'm sorry, I guess we go over some of your top performances in touring car. I was trying to look in there. What was some of the races, or probably nationals or world championships, that you did win? Or came close to winning a world championship wise?
Yeah, so I've run. We'd won a couple at least one national champion indoors on carpet with the street weapon, and that was kind of the initial start with the street weapon, because it was basically off-road car converted with short arms, and we were trying. Everybody's like, "That's not going to work," and I'm just Gil saying, "We can make it work. Just work with me." And I'm like, "Gil, if you say it'll work, I'm in. Where do we go?" And we went to nationals in Illinois with the car, and we're okay, but it wasn't really doing what we wanted to do. And then he's always racing the race as well, so he could practice and see what to do with the chassis. So anyways, he's like, I think I got this. And I'm like, oh, he's like, here, try my car. And I try his car and it's like perfect. And I'm like, okay, I think we have something here. So we ended up, we ran the car. I think the big change was moving the battery pack forward, to move the weight forward, and on carpet, it just made the car handle so nice and fluid. And we won that race, and went and ran it outdoors. I'm trying to remember if I ran a race. Ripon was a popular track. That was a Northern California permit track. I think I got second in Ripon. I don't think I won. I think Barry won that race, but we were really competitive with the street weapon. And we had like a year and a half run with it. And then, some of the other Yokomo and some of the other manufacturers were designing specific touring car. They were seeing what it needed. And then that's kind of when it ran its course. And, and then of course the World Championships in Newcastle, so where Spachette killed us all. He had a magical week there. But I ended up finishing second there. Spachette won. That was a big win. The cars were very good there, and that was a great event as well.
Okay, so I guess you're getting up in age now. When do you start realizing that? Okay, I'm gonna have to do something else in there. And I guess when did retirement first come about? Yeah,
so my last kind of competitive race, as it was then, was in '99 at Ripon, the nationals there. I believe I won 10th and 12th scale, but was second or third in touring car, and that's and I'd gotten married a few years before. I had gone back to college to get my degree. And at that point, I was like, I got to do something. This isn't, it's paying the bills, but not quite like it would for the top guys today. Right. So, so I just kind of said, hey, I think this is going to be my last race. I was 29 or 30. I don't know. Let's do the math. But anyways, it was time to move on. And I was doing an internship in Silicon Valley at one of the tech companies. And, it stopped. It wasn't as fun anymore. It's like anything. It became, when you're not passionate about it and you kind of lose the drive, that's when it's time to go, and it was definitely time to go. It was feeling like I needed to move on to a different chapter. And, it'd been such a great run. And, but, fat, newer, younger kids are coming up winning, and it was, time to pass the torch and head out. So.
All right. So you kind of got out of RC altogether then and went on to, working as a tech in the tech industry.
Exactly. Yeah. So
how long did it take you to get so while you was racing as well, you was also attending school, I assume? Yeah,
I was attending school for the last couple years from like 98 or 97 through 99. I graduated in 99 from San Jose State with an information systems degree. And that's when I retired Ripon was kind of the last race. And then just went to work in the tech industry. A couple different companies. I ended up, last one was a startup company. Startups were big back then. That's back when Google was just getting going and Yahoo was big. And, so the thing was, go get your stock, go find a startup company and see if you could make your millions like some of the guys at Google and Yahoo did. So that's how I ended up back on the East Coast, was starting.
And that's how you ended up working for Trinity then, right?
Right.
Oh, no, you worked for the...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I started a sales office in New York City for this company, worked it for a couple of years, crash happens. And, and I'd been in contact with Trinity just because I was back there just to say hi. And they're like, well, why don't you come work for us? And I'm like, well, I don't know. What do you guys need done? So they needed actually a lot of work on their information system stuff. So ended up back at Trinity doing that, not really wanting to go race, but just as a job in the, doing the IT stuff there. And which of course ended up going back, doing some racing, nitro touring car. They were importing a nitro touring car at the time, and some on-road racing, but it really wasn't the focus, you know. It was just more, well, if you're here, you might as well do that type of thing, you know. So,
okay. How long did you do that for?
I was at Trinity till, I think I was there 3 years, until 2005, I believe. Okay. And then I took a year, maybe 2004. And then I had left Trinity, kind of took a year. I was doing some consulting, IT consulting. And then that's when I went to the New York Toy Fair in New York City, which is a big toy fair. My sister was working it with the company she was for. So I went to visit her because she was still on the West Coast and she was just out there. So I went to visit her, and then I went downstairs to the RC side of things, and ended up, I believe RC Car Action was there, and this guy who worked for them called Chris Chianelli, and got to talking with him, and he had mentioned that Kyosho was coming to the U.S. and opening their own distribution, and I'm like, oh, that's great, yeah, it's about time they did that, etc. So he's like, I'm going to talk to Aki and have him call you. And so Aki gives me a call. Aki Suzuki, who owned, is a founder's son of Kyosho, who was running it at that point, called me and said, basically, what are you doing? I'm like, so I told him what I was doing. He's like, why don't you come work for us back in California? And talked with my wife, and we decided, okay, we'll go do that. So that's kind of how the Kyosho thing, Kyosho America job came about.
And what was you doing at Kyosho America?
So Kyosho America, I ended up being the vice president. So basically running the operation.
Oh, running everything. So there was no IT work there. It was just
no IT work. Yeah. I did end up doing IT work there because I could do it, but yeah, it was under the guidance of the Japanese, kind of executing on their plans and how they wanted things, and so worked with a lot of great people there who are still there. Now they're back in Texas. But
they moved to Texas.
Yeah. So really enjoyed that time.
We're starting to see a Kyosho resurgence in the 8-scale world. It went dormant for quite some time, and I think since Ryan Lutz in America, it's always been a popular car in Asia, in the 8-scale side in Asia and in Europe. But now we're starting to see, I think since Lutz has come on, the 8-scale side of things starting to build up again in the last 2 years, especially now with Little Bump coming on. We're starting to see more and more Kyosho drivers at these big 8-scale races that I attend.
Yeah, no, I love to see it. Like I said, it's just a first-class company. They make great products, and it's a natural evolution as all these new companies come in. People go to there because it's new and exciting. And as they start to drop off, or they're no longer new and exciting, then they come back to kind of where they start. So it doesn't shock me.
Yeah. It's and I was talking to Joseph. He was at the Montpellier GP this weekend, and it's like, dude, there was a lot of Kyoshos there. I was like, yeah, it's France. Like, of course, it's going to be a lot of Kyoshos there.
Oh yeah, that's
all right.
Center for Kyosho.
All right, so I assume this then led to you and Gil eventually forming AKA, which then you guys went on your own. I know Gil Losi has been a big one of the, like, you've named a couple of guys, Dieter, Gary Keiss. This guy sounds like a character. I like to meet him as well.
Yes.
But definitely Gil Losi Jr. has been one of the guys to stand out in your career. How did everything with AKA start, and how did that come about with you and him?
Yeah, so I got hired on a Kyosho. I'm there a few months, back in California, so I was getting reacquainted, seeing all my buddies, Gil being one of them. And Aki gave us, after a few months, said, I would like to start a brand that is Western, more Western than Kyosho, something that's USA centric, whatever that this market wants. I'd like to start a brand to make products to address that. And so he said, what do you think? I'm like, well, we could do it. It's just got to find the right people. So And at the same time, I was talking with Gil. They had just prior to this, they had sold Team Losi to Horizon. Mm-hmm. And so I think he'd been there. Maybe it had been a couple of years, but I think Gil he had fulfilled his duties there, if you will, after the sale, and he was kind of looking for something different. So I contacted him, and we started talking, and he's like, "Yeah, this could be pretty interesting." Yeah. So he came about, talked to Aki. Obviously, when a name like Gil Losi is, in the picture, people want to, people's ears perk up, et cetera. So, he had talked to Aki, and Aki gave him what he wanted, and Gil gave him his thoughts on how it could be done. And boom, they're like, okay, here we go. So, Gil leaves Team Losi, moves, gets hired on by Kyosho, and we come up. So the idea is, well, I think Aki wanted to make aftermarket parts, et cetera. And Gil was like, no, what we should do is do tires. He said it's an underserved part of the market. It's a consumable. And, it fits perfectly with Kyosho's 8-scale cars, right? I mean, they were such a big brand at that time in the market, number one probably. So that's how we ended up kind of going into tires. And at the same time, Mark Pavidis was kind of looking for something new, and he'd reached out to us, and obviously a perfect fit with the tire thing. And so we brought him in to help with the tire project. And that's kind of how AKA got started as a brand at Kyosho. So it was it took us about just under a year to get the first molds and everything ready to go and make a tire, actually press rubber into a mold and see something come out. So
how much time went into going into that, just making that first tire to be sold and all that?
Like I say, yeah, it was almost a year. I mean, there's so much that goes into it. One is you got to design the tire. Two, that's probably the easiest part in the beginning. Then you got to put a mold around the tire. You got to come up with a concept of how is the mold going to be constructed? What type of machine is it going in? Okay, where is that machine? Where are we going to make these, et cetera? So, Mark was doing a lot of that work. Gil was out looking for vendors, local. Mm-hmm. We wanted to make them locally in Southern California, so he was looking for the right vendor to make the tires, and that took quite a bit of time. And then, of course, developing logos. How are we going to package it? Where got to design wheels, got to go find plastic wheel vendor, and we wanted to make them locally again, not just buy them from overseas. So it was a pretty big undertaking, but everybody was very excited too. I think there was a lot of energy behind it.
Yes,
because of you got
time.
And it really was a perfect time. Everything was stale. Nothing had really changed for the last few years. And,
Proline was like what J-Concept. Well, Proline was the biggest tire company at that time.
Yeah,
I think the closest company that had come close to challenging was Panther at some point. J-Concept still wasn't.
Yeah, they were coming on,
but they wasn't as popular as Proline. So AKA came right in and fit right into that challenging Proline for victories and stuff like that. You guys have multiple national titles and multiple world titles. I mean, he won 2 8-scale titles with Ongaro, which was amazing. He's still one of the most amazing drivers. You guys, Lutz has been with you guys since forever. I think he was like one of your first drivers you signed. Still out there being competitive on the tire as well. So lots of good stuff happened with AKA, and now the tire market is absolutely inundated, flooded with so many tires. It's like I would not even think of starting a tire brand nowadays.
No, that was it didn't take long for people. I think we had such big, good success right off the bat, and everybody's like, "Oh wow, why didn't we think of doing this?" Right? And when we, Gil changed the whole market with the
foams,
molded, the foams, right? Everybody said that's never going to work, and Gil's like, "Well, let me see." That's his specialty, right? Proving everybody wrong. And now, nobody'd think of putting an open cell foam in a tire, right? Never. Our packaging with the resealable bags, everybody uses that now. So it's flattering that everybody copied us, but we could see the barrier to entry it became less and less as the years went on, with being able to make stuff overseas. So that's, part of the reason at the end we just said, it's time to go. Yeah. it's a busy market.
I think you sold at the right point too. You sold just before it got super busy.
Yeah, we could see the handwriting on the wall, and it was, it just wasn't fun anymore. And part of it was the amount of people coming into the market. The other part of it was the deterioration of the, where we could make these things, and the rubber industry in the United States in general, from buying the rubber to pressing rubber into molds, the expertise was leaving, and it was getting harder and harder to make it in the U.S. Proline was fortunate; they had everything in house, pretty big advantage. So we just saw that, again, it was just our time. It had run its course, so we had a lot of fun, and we think we changed a lot of things for the better, which is always very satisfying, and it was time to go. So
okay. I guess we'll wrap it up with a couple of things. 2007, you go out and win another national championship. You get into 8-scale ONROAD racing, the Formula One of RC. Nothing more exhilarating than watching these cars go.
Yes.
Steel City was a big reason for that. How did that come about after so many years of electric racing? And how did that not happen more back in the day?
Well, I was actually contacted quite a bit in my prime, if you will, to race 8-scale, but Trinity would never let me do it. It was always a conflict, or we don't want you. I think they knew it was very enticing because it's very exciting, and they might lose me to that. Although I don't think there was nearly as much money in that as there was electric for drivers. But it's always something I wanted to do. So when I went to Kyosho in 2005, there's a gentleman that I basically, I worked with and worked for, Sasai-san, who was very much an 8-scale on-road driver from Japan. And he said, do you want to go race 8-scale on-road? Because he wanted to do it, and he wanted somebody to go do it with. And I'm like, yes. I go, yes, I want to race. Yeah. Can I do this? And he's like, yes, we'll go. It was kind of our fun little project we did together. So we, I'd never done it really before in turn. And so he taught me a lot. We went racing, started learning the cars. It was 8-scale on-road is Gil Losi's favorite class to race as well. I mean, he TQ'd the 84 Worlds, I think that's
I believe so,
yeah, with Serpent. They used to import Serpent. So he loves the class. So he was kind of jealous, but he was helping me out because he was there. I just loved doing it. I was able to get competitive at it, and really had some great years racing 8-scale on-road. We had the Serio engines imported through Kyosho, America. So it's just, I did that. I, raced for a couple years. Vegas was a magic event, was very competitive there, and was able to, Vegas is always it's tough to tune motors there because of the altitude. And the track was very demanding. It's a board track basically. So there are some really nasty, if you make a mistake, tear your car apart. And, Mike Swager, unfortunately for him, made a pretty big mistake in the beginning of the main event and tore his car apart. He was TQ. And then I was able to, come home with a win there, and very fun to win another national championship at 40, which was very cool.
Do you still have your 8-scale stuff? Would you dabble back into any type of RC at this point?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good question. If you used to go back and do anything right now,
8-scale
any genre, what would you do?
It's my fun. 8-scale on-road is my fun. I mean, it's not big right now. Just there's no tracks, unfortunately, for it. They just had a race in Florida over the weekend. I was scheduled to go, but I've got a new job coming up, and I decided I needed wasn't sure when they wanted me to start, so I didn't go to the race, but I was going to go to that race. I ran the nationals last summer, finished second, and
it
so
definitely needs help in America.
It does. It's a class. The whole class needs to be. It's very expensive. The cars are difficult to drive, not just because of the speed, but the way they're constructed. The solid axle one ways. I mean, you have to drive the thing so committed to get them to turn. It's not for everyone, right? It's not a beginner class. I don't think the class would ever be big, but it'd be. We had such a perfect racetrack in Fontana where they had the Worlds a few years ago. Unfortunately, NASCAR decided they want to put warehouses there, and just not sure what NASCAR's priorities are anymore. But the good
not RC, that's for sure.
Yeah, not RC, not go-karting, not fans, it seems, because we're all NASCAR fans, and now we're not NASCAR fans. But anyway, so if I had something to go back to, it's 8-scale on-road. I still have all my stuff. It's still if I'm going to do anything, that's what I'm going to do. It's just so much fun.
What class for you was your all-time favorite, though? What you enjoyed racing the most? What you would, if you could go back and do it again?
I think 12-scale carpet is still my own. I mean, that's kind of where 12-scale in general is where I grew up. I really enjoy the whole atmosphere of carpet racing. And the cars are so different now and drive so different. It's not right now. It's not my favorite to drive. The cars are just I'm probably getting old, obviously, but they're a lot more difficult. They're because they have solid axles in them, and it's just you get to the turn and you turn. There's no setup or anything like that for the turn. They're just you're much later on everything when you drive them. That's why I like 8-scale on-road. It's a little, the cars still feel natural to how I grew up driving cars. And I think, touring car, electric in general is just so fast too. With the brushless stuff is just, it all needs to be slowed down. I know I sound old saying that, but I think if we want people to do it again, it needs to be slow. They got to slow them down so somebody could drive the things.
Max would agree with you. He says you need to slow them down.
Okay.
So speaking of, I got my first taste of on-road. I was commentating at the 12-scale Worlds here last year and in 2023. My first exposure to that type of genre of racing. I found it exciting. Not many entries, 70 people compared to the previous Worlds. But was some exciting race. We had Kemp Anderson there representing America. Looks to be a bright spark for American RC. In on-road, we have that young guy, Bryce Butterfield, in Nitro. That's pretty, and there's probably a couple other electric guys that I'm not mentioning, but there's two stick out from in mine. They say 12 scale is starting to make a little bit of a comeback with like the GTA, GTV.
Yeah.
The more scale looking 12 scale cars.
Yeah.
But I think in comparison to what on-road was back in your day, back it was in the 90s, it's not as big as it used to be. And I think they have to come back to the parking lot stuff, right? And doing that. But the cars don't even seem like they're designed to run on that type of stuff anymore. No.
As much as the cars have changed, they haven't. It's just a different way of doing the same thing in a way. And that's not good or bad. It's some of the cars are just amazing. I love the design of them. But yeah, they're meant for carpet racing. There's
right.
You can't put them on asphalt with any sort of bumps anymore. There's barely a millimeter of rubber on the tires anymore. It's just so much have changed. And, touring car is still what could still be run outdoors. And they look sort of like a car anymore. I mean, they're kind of like guppies running around now with everything pushed forward.
That's a guppy. That's what they look like.
It's a little guppy running around, but
just different colors.
Just different colors. So if we could get back to having, I've always said, there shouldn't be body rules. It should just say if it's licensed by a real manufacturer, it's legal. Meaning if it looks like something.
That's how it should
be.
The Tamiya class was or still is, where you have to run the Tamiya bodies, and it looks cool, right? It attracts more people. all that type of stuff. I don't know what ONROAD's going to do.
It needs complete rules overhaul. Everything's been pretty much the same for 15, 20 years.
Same as 8-scale nitro and whatnot. Yeah. One thing I like that you do is you call this a sport. So that's a great debate. Hobby or sport? What is it?
I think it's a sport. I mean, it's a hobby for some, but it's a sport for many. You can call it what you want.
Any other sport, you do the hobby of that sport. So it is both a hobby and a sport.
Yeah. I mean, these guys are spending thousands of dollars flying all over. There's people that it's a sport. Okay. I mean, in Europe, they treat it as a sport for sure. So
I don't know how. Do you follow racing any bit now? Do you still stay in touch with it a little bit?
I haven't at all, really. I mean, maybe the 8-scale stuff because I was still somewhat involved in that. But as far as 8-scale off-road or electric off-road, I really haven't followed it much.
Okay, that's awesome. I was wondering who you thought you might have any thoughts on who some of the top drivers in the world would be. Like, I would love to see more crossover as well. I like to see, but these guys' schedules are so busy. I like to see more on-road, off-road crossover. I think Coelho is the only one that's doing it. We're going to see Ronafalk do a little bit of it as well over the next year with X-Ray.
Yeah.
But I really wish we would see more of these off-road guys go over and race some on-road. But in all your years of racing with these different guys, who are some of these special guys that you've met that were some of like the all-time best in your opinion?
Wow. Well, I mean, Masami, obviously, in the electric side. I don't know if anybody I don't think there's anybody any better. I mean, they took it to a whole nother level from a driving standpoint all the way down to cars. Obviously Kinwald on the electric side just dominated his era. Enjoyed it. Matt Francis, great personality, great driver. On-road side, trying to think. Rick Howard is one of the guys from way back when I first started that's still doing it, still competitive today. Really always enjoy talking with him, and he's still in the American touring car scene, still can bring it. And Spachette, obviously, huge talent. Dreschers, huge talent. I'm sure I'm missing people. It's
what about guys like when you see guys like Coelho who can pretty much do everything?
Oh yeah,
I mean a guy like Ongaro who's kind of just one.
Of course, yeah. I mean, I kind of going through guys I raced with, but Ongaro again, just like a generational talent, as they would say, in sports. Someone who just, as a kid, you just knew it was just natural to him. He's not out there thinking; he's just doing it. Coelho, I haven't seen a lot of his drives. I've only seen him on the internet, but obviously an immense talent. You could go back and forth, which is.
I wish he would race 1/8 scale again.
I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure he would kill it. I think he had run 8 scale in the past.
I would like to see X-Ray get back into 1/8 scale racing.
Right. I mean, Ronafalk was another guy that was just so good. He was one of our first drivers. I remember him as a like 12, 10, maybe 10-year-old, from Sweden, one of a AKA driver, show driver.
All right. Okay. And our last question will be, what do you think we're missing? What do you think about the state of our industry now before you left? How was it?
Well, it had gone through a huge growth. And then I think it was starting, you could see it. I mean, it was starting to contract again. The Horizon's out buying different companies, trying to put them all under one roof. I think the amount of competition and the lack of barrier to entry also kills innovation, because there's nothing at the end of the rainbow if you spend all this time innovating something new, because somebody can copy it in a second. So it really stifles innovation. And so I mean, I think the racing's pretty healthy. I don't know about the whole industry side of things is. I think drivers' contracts have shrunk. The overall market.
On the professional level, it's starting to shrink big time.
Yeah.
On the regional sponsored level, it's as big as ever.
Exactly. Well, I think you're going to see the racing market turn more into direct sales market. That's why you're seeing all the regional sponsorships go up. It's a direct sales model.
Exactly.
They're sponsoring them, but because it's hard for a hobby shop to carry this racing items when they're not, when a new thing is just on the horizon, right? How do you know when to clear your wall out? How do you know what's coming next, unless you're truly plugged in? So a lot of shops don't want to carry it, and rightfully so. So the only way to really sell racing product is start to go direct to the driver. And I think when that happens, I think it'll grow again. I mean, the prices should come down a little bit, but the overall, I think innovation will go up. It's going to spark guys with 3D printers to start making stuff again. And, it would probably be pretty exciting. And it'd be nice if the rules bodies would change some of the rules to force it, to get it jump started and say, I know it's been this way for 20 years, but in 2 years, we're going to do this. And you're going to you can't just sell the same kit you have for the past 10 years. So
it's a big change because RC has been without rule changes for quite some time. We just saw Raw try to make a rule change on truggy bodies, and oh man, the shit hit the fan for like a week and a half. So it's all good. But Mr. Johnson, I want to thank you for your time, man. It was a great chat with you. I learned a lot about you and your era of all that type of RC. I greatly appreciate it. I'm sure I have some ONROAD guys, when I told them that you're going to be on us, they were geeking out. So I hope they enjoy it as well. And I hope to see you at a race one day. I hope you get back to racing, because it's good that you still enjoy it. And thank you for your time and all that you've done for RC. We appreciate it.
Oh, I love talking with you. It's fun to remember all the old times and share some of this, and hopefully, people realize, what it was like back then, and keep the history. So I really appreciate being here.
Absolutely. Thank you. And enjoy the rest of your day.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
BeachRC.com, the racer's one-stop online hobby shop. Choose from all the popular brand and variety in stock with super fast shipping and great customer service. BeachRC.com still has the local hobby shop feel with all the benefits of the internet. BeachRC.com is the exclusive distributor for Ultimate Racing, S-Works, Pro Circuit Racing tires, Nitro Lux fuels, and Assault RC performance products. So fill up your cart and check out at BeachRC.com today.
That's right. A big shout out to Brent, Lucas, and everybody there at Beach RC. Thank you for their continued support. I look forward to seeing them. Probably won't see them till later on this year at Fall Brawl, I think. Or maybe I'll see them at AMS. But good job. We have an affiliate link for Beach RC's products in the if you use that, we got a little slice of it. I greatly appreciate it. And a big shout out to Beach RC coming on as the title sponsor for the live stream coverage of the 2024 IFMAR IC or Nitro Buggy Off-Road World Championships from RC Redovan Spain, brought to you by RC Racing TV. I look forward to working with our friends from RC Racing TV. Also, don't forget, coming up October 18th to 20th at the Nitro Compound in Maricopa, Arizona is the AZ Oktoberfest 24. That's right. It's starting Friday through Sunday, and you'll have a plethora of classes, live coverage by Mod Media. Your head sponsor, your title sponsor is MG23. I heard there's going to be drivers like Mayfield, Heckert, I think FCJ, Frankie Contreras Jr., and a couple other guys that signed up. Tony Schumacher and AJ Schumacher have built a beautiful track out there. I mean, I've never been to this track, but I want to go, and it's huge. It looks great. They're kind of redoing the design now because it's such a big track. There's so much elevation that they're redoing the track. They're going to have a factory tracks rebuild by Anthony Westergaard. So put it on your calendars, everybody. The AZ Oktoberfest 24, October 18th to 20th at the Nitro Compound in Maricopa, Arizona. Hopefully I get out there one day. By the way, they have RV parking available as well. All right, everybody. I think that's going to end our day. I hope you guys enjoyed the chat with Joe Johnson. I enjoy getting to know him a little better. Seems like a very smart guy. Seems like I always go back to the 80s, early 90s. It's a time I was a little too young, but it seems like a very good era of RC. I came up more in the Attitude era. But I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation with Joe Johnson. Look forward to our podcast next week with JQ, Roach, and Max, and it should be interesting. And I almost want to make it a live show, but it just won't be feasible. It'd be live, but it'd be in the afternoon. We won't get much people. So we probably will not be doing it live. And look forward to all the NNRC content that Max and I will be bringing you from the Worlds coming up. If you haven't already followed the NNRC on TikTok, Instagram, or especially on our YouTube, and if you aren't subscribed to our Facebook, that's where you're going to find most of the stuff. You're probably going to find most of the shorts on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, and then you'll find the longer videos, interviews with drivers, laps with drivers, and all that type of stuff. Whatever. Max has got some stuff planned. Whatever. We're going to kick ass, and we're going to have fun doing it. We're looking forward to having fun at Red Avon and bringing you guys the coverage from all the ins and outs. I'm sure Max he'll have some stuff. We're going to have written reports, all that stuff. So we want to thank you guys for all that support. We look forward to it. We are excited. I'm starting to get excited for the Worlds, but I'm trying to keep it mellow. I don't want to peak too early with my excitement. I want to be peaking next week around this time. No, sorry, not even next week. In 2 weeks around this time. So I got to mellow out my enthusiasm for the Worlds, but I'm excited. Anyway, guys. That said, you all have a good weekend of RC. I greatly appreciate the support. Big shout out to the NNRC squad around the world. We can't do it without you guys. Thank you for all the continued support. A big shout out to the patrons and YouTube members of the NNRC. If you wish to support the podcast financially a little bit every month, you can. Links for that in the written description. We greatly appreciate it. And a big shout out to all these companies that support the podcast. Remember, everybody, showing the sponsors some love, shows the podcast some love. They are Invisible Speed, High Tech RC, Corsatec USA, Sidewinder Fuel, Mayako, Beach RC, Techno RC, Clinic RC, Stacked RC, Racecraft USA. A big shout out to Donovan RC and Cow RC, as well as RC Box Club, Elite RC Productions, the Florida RC Championships. Good luck to everybody at Tallahassee this weekend. I wish I was there with you guys. A big shout out to RC Body Armor, House of RC, 36 Mood, and of course, RC Sign Up. And a big shout out to our drivers, David Ronnefalk, Robert Badier, Alexander Hagberg, Matty G, Pekko Ivanen, Hotman, and Mason Fuller. Good luck, JQ, at the 40+ Euros. Do us proud and win something for once. That will be great. Anyway, you guys have a great weekend. Good luck to everybody at the eNats this weekend. Good luck to everybody at the 40+ Euros this weekend. Thank you, everybody, for the support. Nitro is the glory. E-Buggy pays the bills. Lefty is out. Have a good weekend, everybody. Be safe. Be safe. And I'm looking for my outro, and I can't find. You know what? I haven't played this outro for a long time.
Thank you for listening to the No Name RC podcast. We greatly appreciate all the support and love from you, the listeners. Without all of you, none of this is possible. Special thanks to our patrons on Patreon. If you wish to support the podcast further, you can at patreon.com/NNRC podcast. As a patron, you will receive early releases, special content, and patron-only giveaways. Also, please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and our website, www.nnrcpodcast.com. Remember, Nitro is the glory, but E-Buggy pays the bills. If you aren't having fun, it doesn't make sense. And if you ain't grinding, you're sliding. Lefty out. Nitro is the glory. Nitro is the glory. Nitro is the glory.